right. Welcome, everybody. It's Talk Openly, the first of the year.
Woo-hoo!
All right. Yeah, great. So I'm Jack, and I'm here with my excellent and lovely friend Daniel. Hey, Daniel.
Hi, Jack. Hello, everybody. All of our friends out there in Talk Openly land.
Yeah, we're so glad to be back. We were gone last week. I was flying back from LA, and yeah, so I'm really glad to be here. I have to say though, Daniel, I am exhausted. And so if you see and feel me lagging, that's what's happening. I'm just floored. Uh,
Okay, all
yeah.
right. Too much of the LA lifestyle.
Yeah, my sister and I have completely different sleep schedules. Like I stay at her house when I'm there for the holidays. And I think she could go to bed at 3 and be fine. But we kind of met in the middle and went to bed at like midnight for
Uh-oh.
night.
Uh-oh.
Yeah.
Uh,
And
my goodness, I think I've lost it. Lost the internet connection.
oh no,
Ay.
okay. Yeah, you froze a little bit, but I there you go.
There we go. We're back.
We're back. But yeah, so did you hear? I stayed up until like midnight several nights in a row, and yeah, I think and in the last couple of weeks, I've really only worked like a few days, just because of how my schedule works. I get 3-day weekends when I'm not going in for my school internship, so um, yeah, my whole schedule's just been way thrown off, and so I was like sleeping from like 12 to 8. Usually I'd get up at like
Yeah,
5. And
yeah.
so yeah, it's both Saturday night and last night. It was like I went to bed and then I was just wired, like could not sleep. And so I did the thing where eventually I just got up and started reading, and even then I just couldn't get tired. So I think I probably got maybe like 1 or 2 hours of sleep last night.
Okay, all
And
right.
it was Saturday night, so I'm yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
firing on the final cylinders.
Though, now, like, basically, now we're finally sort of maybe possibly at something closer to like an equal level, right?
Yeah.
You're firing on one cylinder. I think I'm firing on all of them. So I think that
Yeah.
finally now we're more evenly matched.
I thought you were gonna say something like, now we're gonna like see like the real Jack, like no like kind of pretenses, like and like I think this is sometimes when we're like exhausted by life or whatever, our teachers will kind of point that out, right? That
Yeah.
like, hey, this is it, this is you. This is your misperceived self. And I'm kind of feeling that, like honestly, a little bit of
Mm.
like the hallucinatory quality of everyday life is just like, okay, it's really not as solid as it seems.
No, no, all those constructs, it's hard to maintain them all,
It
right? So
is.
they begin, as the constructs begin to sort of like fall apart, right? Then so does our solidity, you know? And it takes a lot of energy to maintain that, a whole lot.
Yeah, for
So
sure.
yeah. Well, I'm glad that thank you for coming anyway and not canceling on us.
Oh,
I really,
totally. I
I
couldn't do
appreciate you
that.
being here, and I like your candor. I really like. I think it's cool, right? You show up, and this is how you are, right? And that's great.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
mean, I feel like that's what Talk Openly has to be, if we're gonna be vulnerable and transparent, it's gotta be with our everyday realities, what's happening right
yeah,
now. So
yeah. Well, what's happening right now? Just to be clear, is it's raining cats and dogs outside here in Sacramento.
fun.
And I am on a somewhat spotty internet connection
Uh-huh.
on a computer with a broken keyboard. So, I'd say that the situation here is a little tired as well. Not me physically or mentally, but the environment is maybe a little bit tired as well. So if there's some hiccups, if there's some freezing of the computer or whatever, just trust that I'll do my best to come back
Yeah,
and keep it going. So,
great.
but
Yeah.
so while you were out gallivanting about Southern California,
Yes.
first of all, did you have a good time? And second, how was your practice during this time frame?
Oh, thanks for asking. Yeah, I did have a good time. I It's hard, right? Because like seeing family is always both like a mix of loveliness and also kind of sadness, like um there's ways that I'm very different from my family, and that's okay. Um and but I don't necessarily get to like share my full self with them all the time. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
there's just a little bit of like where I'm not part of their culture in
Do
a lot
you,
of ways.
yeah, do you find then, speaking of maintaining constructs, do you find yourself in that position where you have to put energy into maintaining their constructs of Jack?
Yes. Yeah. I've dropped some of that, I think, over the years.
Yeah.
Part of that is just like physically how I present to my family now is very different than what I used to try to present as. And so that's, different for them, is like kind of the more masculine appearing Jack. But yeah, I mean, I think I've also like just kind of like forgiven that in my mind. Like I no longer feel like I have to like prove myself to them as like, no, this is me as my like separate autonomous self, like and sometimes that comes out. It does come out in like little ways where I'm just like irritable about it. But I've kind of just yeah, let loosened around it, I think. Not necessarily, I haven't let it go, and in no way am I gonna like not be myself, right? But I've loosened around needing them to see me exactly how I see myself, I guess is what is what I'm saying. Because I
Yeah, boy, you've given up the impossible, haven't you?
yeah, yeah. Right, right. Yeah, because um my my family's kind of worldview is just very different from my own,
Hmm.
and that's just how it is.
Right.
Um, and I'm not gonna bully them into into seeing me a certain way. Uh,
No, it wouldn't work, right?
it doesn't work.
It doesn't
There's
work
so much
that way.
resistance, right?
Everybody wishes actually that they could just make everybody else believe and see things the way that they do. Then everything would be okay.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Then we would live under a certain form of it would be like my form of fascism, I guess.
Did you
Like,
ever? Yeah, it'd be
do it
like
this
the.
way.
Did you ever watch Star Trek? You know the Borg.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'd be like that. Like everybody's just like the Borg, right? It's all just
Mhm.
one thing. That's not exciting, right?
It's not.
We don't
No, we
want
don't want
that.
that. Mm-mm.
No,
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 we don't
no.
want that.
Little diversity does a body good.
Absolutely. Yeah. Does a body and does a world good.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, no, it was enjoyable, and watch the movies,
Hmm.
definitely feel a little bit like marinated in holidays and just want it to be like gone.
It's over,
Like,
Jack. It's
it's over.
over.
It's
It's
over.
over.
Oh my God. Okay.
You're safe.
God.
It's okay now. It's okay. You made it through.
Well,
You are
thank
now on the other side. You've made it to
you.
the other side.
Oh
Congratulations.
goodness. Oh, phew. Yeah, and another cool thing, I feel like I'm talking a lot about myself right now because I'm kind of tired, I'm rambling,
Do
but
it.
in 5 months, 5 months, I will almost be done with school. That's
Oh.
only 5 months away. That's
You know
s-
what's so cool about the around this stage is that you can actually very easily imagine and tell yourself that in a future time, not too far away, it's already done. you're
Yeah.
over it, right? You can almost envision yourself sort of like on the other side of that as well. Just
Yeah.
like, right before Christmas, I think, when we were talking, there was this sort of like, we're going to survive. Okay, yeah, we can make
Yeah.
it through. It's going to be over soon, right? At least that was my attitude.
Oh yeah.
And
Yeah. And I
and
felt
and with that faith and confidence, here we are. We made it to the other side.
yeah.
And that same thing is true for your schooling, right? You've been doing it. You've been working hard at it. It's caused all kinds of stress and opened your mind in new ways and all kinds of stuff. And now it'll be over.
Yep. Yep. That is the way that I sometimes use the truth of impermanence as a little bit of an escape route.
That's right.
Like I'll kind of I'll be like, okay, it's gonna end, it's gonna end, it's gonna end because that's inevitable. Change is inevitable.
Right.
And so sometimes, and I talked about this a while back when I did a talk at the temple, where like I had to be a little bit careful to not use that as like kind of a spiritual bypass around like what I'm
Mm-hmm.
actually doing right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yes, it is encouraging. And I also want to like make sure to like be present for what I'm doing. Because that feels important too, I guess.
If you're gonna make me. So what was it like? How long were you with family and doing the holiday thing?
Well, I was really only there for 4 days.
Perfect. So this
Yeah.
question, this is a good question then.
All right.
What does your regular meditation practice, what happens to it when you go to LA for 4 days to be with family?
It's interesting. I have to fit it in, right? I'm not on my schedule. So I have to be even more like diligent about, like making space, making time. So for, this round of holidays, uh a few days I would go out to a park that's near my sister's place. And it was like 65 degrees and like
Mm.
full sun. And so I was just like soaking it up. And that was really nice, doing meditation outside. I actually love meditating at public parks.
Yeah, me
Um,
too.
there's something about like the sound of other people, activity, children,
Hmm.
music, all these things. It almost kind of like replaces the distraction that happens up here as like,
Yeah,
okay, there's some distraction out there.
it's
So
out there.
yeah, and it's in some way that's like kind of pacifying. So that was really pleasant. Um, but there was one or two times that I did just have to do it kind of like in a pinch, like in a back room when other people are like clanging pots and playing music and stuff, and
Yeah.
that's also fine. Just a different kind of distraction. But I do notice that with that kind of like rushing to get it done, like to fit it in, there is a loss of the kind of like mystical element that maybe comes with a more intentioned um practice. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
I know what you mean. The reason it was sort of for personal reasons I was asking.
Mm. Yeah, yeah. Oh, I hear.
Because I was also gone for a short period of time. I was hanging out with family up north in Fort Bragg. That's where I got this cool hat. Got it at a thrift shop up
Oh,
in Fort Bragg. I love. It's
yeah.
so warm. It's a wool hat and it keeps my bald head warm, and it
That's
makes me
great.
look like I have some hair in here.
Yeah, right.
No,
Hell
don't
yeah.
be fooled. There's nothing under it.
Ah,
Nothing at
damn
all. But it was interesting because I before I left, I was like, grabbing my stuff and I had originally I was like, okay, I'm gonna bring my whole like my mat and my meditation pillow and all of this stuff. And then I was like, no, actually, I'm not gonna do that. I don't wanna do that. I don't want to drag this stuff around with me. There's plenty of places to sit, park bench or whatever.
Mhm.
And what I noticed actually was that over those 4 days, I did not sit and meditate, not in formal like meditation.
Yeah.
I did the more it's weird, but like I didn't lose track of it. You know what I mean? Like the intention to be present, to be mindful, to be watching was still there, but I decided instead, because there weren't really a lot of opportunities to just like escape, eject, and go and like sit somewhere. So instead, I just would do it sort of in the course of being with everyone, and it was kind of funny actually. We were at this like I was with several people, and we were at this like open mic thing. People are singing and playing music and stuff like that. And at one point, I was like, "Oh, this is perfect. This is ideal. I've got a seat. I have time. I have, like there's all kinds of stuff, ruckus going on around me, but I can just be here." And it
Yeah.
was this beautiful meditation. It was really gorgeous. And then my girlfriend sort of like she like kind of tapped me and was like, "Are you meditating right
Nice.
and I found that like same thing in nature. So we would go for walks, and like there were all kinds of wonderful like mushrooms and things. I love various funguses, and
Yeah.
Mendocino, that area is just full of them.
Oh
So
yeah.
there was that, like going out, and while walking, I would just like I'd fall back a bit, behind the rest of the group, and then just sort of like just observe, just watch, like this, like just instead of formal seated meditation, just be like, okay, like what's going on, like how's your mind right now? What's it look
Right.
like? What is it that's pulling you away? And I found it helpful, but it's sort of like going to the gym or something like that, where the formal, regular routine is really important to maintain. And even if you're not maintaining it in the same way, still putting some attention to it. Like if you're going to the gym, maybe, okay, fine, do a few sit ups, do a few push ups, do something, right, to
Yeah.
keep it going. Because otherwise, there's more
Yeah.
resistance to getting started. But it felt really good today to get like right back like into my space and
Yeah.
my everything, and like get back into that sort of it's not always mystical, but a little bit more along that kind of just that precious meditation space. I don't know what else to call it.
Yeah.
It felt really good to get back into it. Yeah, yeah. Anyway, yeah, so
Yeah.
that's why I was curious.
Yeah, no, and I love hearing about how you found the time within, time with family. And I think, I mean, honestly, like that's what we should be doing, right? Is like,
Right.
and
Yeah.
but like what you know, I was just thinking, like I tend to kind of sometimes check out when I'm with my family a little bit.
Yeah,
And
sure.
I would love to, practice that of like, no, actually, I'm going to meditate on this. Like, I'm going to just see how focused
Yeah.
I can be with this. And, and actually, I did have that intention before one of my, um, get-togethers with people. But then I totally lost it. It was, there was too much chaos and, um, yeah, but I like that idea of like, no, I'm gonna use these moments that I have rather than
That's what we're training for, right? Is
yeah,
to be
yeah,
is so
yeah,
that we're always in a meditative state, right? Always present, always watching. I actually found what was interesting is when I did what you just said with other people. So I'd be in a group, everyone's talking, and I have a tendency to want to talk a lot. Right? I like to hear myself talk. I like to argue. I like to whatever BS, that kind of stuff.
yeah,
And what was interesting is I noticed that, so I was like I'd be a little bit more intentional, and just observe for a
yeah,
while without talking. And what's really neat about it is that in conversation, if you're intentionally being present and paying attention to what's happening in front of you, you really get to hear what people are saying. And
yeah,
what happens is your own engagement increases in quality because you're actually responding to what other people are saying. It's a genuine conversation. You really are, like, you're getting sort of HD conversation, right? High definition, because you're really there for it. And not only that, but the other everybody else appreciates that too, right? Like there's a
so
feeling
much.
of spaciousness and an allowing and not talking over. And so it actually does a lot of good, I think, just in ordinary old conversations too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's something I need to remind myself of all the time.
Yep.
Yeah, especially with people that I'm like the closest with too,
Yeah.
where
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, I'm just, like hearing about someone's day, my partner or my roommate, where it's like, actually, that's really precious. I want to hear about your day,
Yeah.
but it's just so easy to check out, in those moments where it's like, okay, I can kind of guess, and if I'm just kind of responding like, oh wow, yeah, okay, yep,
Yeah.
yeah, I can be a little bit rude. I have to be honest with my attention when it comes to my closer friends.
Yeah, yeah, it's understandable. It really
Yeah,
is. It
yeah, it is.
is
Yeah,
for sure. But the best gift we can give anybody, close to them or not, is really our presence of being there.
yeah,
The more that we can do that, the better the experience is for everyone.
yep,
Anyway.
absolutely.
All right. Well, what do you think?
Did we do it? We should practice some mind training.
Some mind training. All right.
Yeah,
Okay. All right. You've got the wherewithal to do a
I
little mind
don't.
training. Okay. All right.
I don't have the wherewithal, but maybe maybe something spontaneous will pop up in my mind.
I bet you that the RLSG, the Random Lojong Slogan Generator on lionswordharmacenter.org, is
Or
going to perk you right up and you're going to get all excited about whatever comes up. I bet
I'm
you.
ready. I'm
Let's
ready.
see. Okay, I'm going to push the button.
All right.
Here we go.
Okay. Oh
Oh.
no way.
is is the universe trying to tell us something?
Oh my God, I guess. And what's great is that, okay, so we've gotten this one at least two times before.
Oh, I think like 4 or 5 times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is showing up for our first show of 2024. So not only have we gotten it several times before, but it's the first one of 2024. I think that's a good sign that we really need to focus on this one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, you want to read it?
I'm gonna read it. 45. Acquire the three root causes. According to Charlotte Kebgon, the three causes are one, the spiritual friend, two, the spiritual instructions, and three, a supportive environment.
Thank goodness we got all three of them, Jack. We can now rest. We acquired the three root causes. We
And
success.
then we're just done, right?
It's all over now, right? Once we got it, what else is there to be done, right? That's what I
Yeah,
really like about this. I know I say it every time. But I feel really quite strongly that this is not a past tense sort of one and done sort of thing, right?
yeah,
Like this is about the beginning. This is the this is the start, right? To
yep,
in order to be well set to take this particular spiritual journey, you have to acquire the three root causes, right? And then it's a question of what you do with that. And I was just gonna, I've been thinking quite a lot actually about the spiritual friend aspect of it.
yeah,
I really am grateful for all of my friends, especially within the sangha, but one in particular, right, Lama Yeshe Jimpa, and one of the things that's so great about him and about my other friends, especially in the sangha, is that to the degree that these are spiritual friends. They serve as models for me, right?
yeah,
Just like the historical Buddha serves as a model for me. I can sort of ask myself, like it's sort of like a basic question. I can just be like, well, what would Lama do right now, right?
totally. Yes, I do
Like just
too.
that question alone,
Yeah.
just that
Oh yeah.
will
So
put
helpful.
Oh man, it'll do all kinds of things, right? Because it's not sort of like, it's not simple. It's not this sort of like, oh, he would say be a nice guy or
Right.
no,
Right.
actually,
Right.
the but would the activity that I'm about to engage in, or with the train of thought that I'm currently humoring, what would Lama, if that was happening to him, what do I imagine him doing with that or saying
Yeah.
about that, right? And actually, I use my other friends the same way. I think about
Hmm.
people that I admire, who are really, really engaged and advanced on the spiritual path that we're on here. And I think of them sort of the same way, right? Like there's oftentimes these moments where I just think like, heck, what would that be like if I, like so and so, whatever, how would they approach this, right?
Yeah.
Like, yeah, like what would Jack do?
Oh. Yeah, because all of us have kind of like a kaleidoscope, right? Where the light of Dharma is kind of shining through us, and it's the same light, but where it's all going to come out in different ways. And so that I love that idea of like thinking about what our different Sangha friends would do or say, because it's all going to be different.
Oh, of course.
And that's
Yeah.
kind of beautiful. And then yeah, I mean, I really this one just really makes me think of precious human life and that reflection,
Yeah.
that that we have these friends, and of course particularly Lama, and that we have instruction, but yeah, not just instruction, but instruction in English. That,
Right.
oh my gosh, like we are
Right.
at a time in our history where it's incredible how much we have access to. I'm reading a book of songs, of Mahamudra meditation, and it's incredible that they're in English. Like this is only within the last few decades, and we have access to this knowledge that has been, yeah, very actually quite secret.
Yeah.
Um, so it's amazing. And then of course our supportive environment, of course the temple, and also like our livelihoods,
Yeah.
that I'm here and I'm surviving, this very kind of tough world that we're in right now, for a myriad of reasons, but I'm so grateful that I have access to that. Um,
Yep. You can imagine there are plenty of ways of making a living in this world that you can see how they might make it challenging to acquire the three root causes in the
yeah,
first place, right? Based, everything from like the schedule and the nature of the work and all of that. And so, yeah, exactly that. This precious life that we have is one where we've met with the Dharma, we've met with a spiritual friend, right? We have what we need in order to do this.
yeah. So
Yeah.
let's do it.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Why don't we start like with the very, very, very,
Oh, the very
very
beginning.
first thing?
Oh, that's right. I forgot. I forgot what we were talking about tonight. Yeah, we're
Yeah,
talking
what
about suffering.
what?
I
Suffering.
know. It's the first of the Four Noble Truths. Um, which it's interesting. I learned today, and it makes sense, that the Four Noble Truths were not actually like the first kind of stuff that the Buddha would teach, particularly like lay practitioners.
Did
It's
you did you watch Doug's Dharma?
I did watch Doug's Dharma. Yeah, yeah, yeah. We should cite Doug's Dharma, because
Yeah,
we both
yeah.
watched that. But isn't that interesting though, that like that wasn't the first, like the stuff that he would start out teaching. He would more be
Right.
teaching about like ethics, or compassion, like how we should treat people,
Yeah.
how we should treat ourselves, which makes sense, because that's the very foundational, like let's just stop hurting ourselves and others. That's a
Yeah.
good place to start. Right?
I love that. I love that because it's not only that the truths can be there, there's sort of a subtle understanding of them that we're going to explore, but there's also this sort of, as bodhisattvas in training, it's important for us to sort of do the same thing, which is there is this desire to share the Dharma and tell people all about this is how it is and explain things to them. But actually, the most helpful thing we can do is just focus on working on ourselves and, engaging in our training ourselves. But also, like, if we really want to help another person, sometimes that help is shown by just teaching them something simple, right? Showing them whatever, how to, get clean water, or how to use the
Right.
internet or something like that.
really practical. Yeah,
practical advice. And
yeah,
I think that's what Doug was saying, right? Lay people, the Buddha would teach lay people helpful things like how to get along with their spouses, how
right.
to deal with unruly children, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I'm reading Old Path White Clouds by Thich Nhat Hanh. And so much of those stories are about like the Buddha teaching, kings and princes like, how does one have like a healthy and peaceful and happy society?
Yeah.
And how to apply that. And yeah, that's such necessary skills for this time that it almost seems like it stops there, right? Like, okay, ethical action, right?
Yeah.
And how to sit, how to calm one's mind. So that's huge. That's like Shambhala right there. So much is are those kind of like preliminary um yeah, ethical kind of instructions.
Yeah.
um but yeah, so Doug was saying that the Four Noble Truths were actually a little bit more kind of advanced,
Right.
which was new to me, I guess. I mean,
Well, it makes perfect sense because
yeah,
what is okay, so let me just ask you this. So of all the people who you've met who think they know something or other about Buddhism, but they're not necessarily practitioners, right? And
yeah.
they say, "Oh, I know what it's saying. It's saying that what? What
that
is that
that it's
life is
just
suffering."
suffering. Yeah, it's I this happened to me recently where I was in like a Zoom call for one of my classes. And this person was just kind of talking about like their work at this counseling agency, and they were really feeling a lot, like they had taken it home with them, right? Like all
Yeah.
the stuff that they've been working with people on. And they kind of just made like a little kind of like sarcastic comment, like, well, and you know what the Buddha says, like life is just suffering. And the conversation like went on, and I was like, gosh, I really want to go back and say, but also there's way more to that, and that's not like the tone that the Buddha would use. And like but it wasn't exactly the right time or to go into a whole explanation of that. But yeah, it's so common, that idea that like that's what Buddhism is about, is that like it's suffering, just accept your suffering.
Yeah.
And there's nothing really to do about it other than navel gaze.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. Yeah.
a
Exactly.
strong misconception in our society.
Just sit and meditate and push away all the negativity.
Right,
That's how you're supposed to do it. Mhm.
right.
Those are the sort of basic misconceptions, and that's happening nowadays, even with the Dharma being available, all these teachings available in all these different languages and whatnot. So back then, when when the Buddha was first talking about these things, you can imagine that it was difficult for people to understand sort of the fine points, and it would take someone who was going to be dedicated, who was going to spend some time trying to understand it, and who really wanted to get to even just get the first of the Four Noble Truths, right? Just to get that alone
Yeah,
would take some time and some effort.
yeah, for sure. Well, let's get into it a little bit. Should we, kind of
Yeah,
like a definition, like what is suffering then? What is
I
that
created a
actually?
list, Jack. I have a list.
I like lists.
I have a
You want to
list.
read
Okay, okay, yep, yep, yep.
it?
So the Pali word that we're talking about is dukkha, right? That's the suffering. That's what's translated as suffering in many cases, um, which is a little bit unfortunate because of the suffering in English sort of has this. It means something a bit more than what it encompasses just one end of the spectrum, right,
Oh,
of what we're talking about here. So I put together this list of translations of the word dukkha.
mm,
These are all common translations.
okay.
So we'll start with suffering, unhappiness, pain, one of my favorites, which is unsatisfactoriness,
Yeah.
unease, stress, anxiety, distress, frustration, difficulty, discomfort, sadness, sorrow, grief, misery, not having what one wants, and having what one doesn't want.
Yeah, and in addition to that, having what one does want, and then the inevitability of it changing, and then we no longer have it in the way that we liked it or wanted it.
Right, right. Exactly that. But what we're pointing to, what and the reason why I like unsatisfactoriness is
Yeah.
because it kind of there's like levels of unsatisfactoriness, like there's
Right.
this sort of very like low level persistent, and then there's like super high levels that we call suffering,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
right? But
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
I was gonna say, like there is a breakdown though, of the like the types of suffering,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or at least the kind that we're talking about. Like dukkha falls into sort of like these three basic camps. What are they? There's dukkha,
The
suffering,
suffering of suffering.
the suffering of suffering.
Yeah, which is
Like,
just like it hurts. I don't like it. It's very obviously uncomfortable or just, yeah, unsatisfactory, something I don't want.
yeah,
Um,
like if you were out for a walk in the forest looking for mushrooms, and all of a sudden somebody shot you in the butt with an arrow.
no,
Yep.
that sucks.
That would suck. And that
Yeah,
right there would be dukkha.
yeah, yeah. Just all out, like that's no good.
That
Nobody
sucks. It doesn't matter if you're a deer or a human being or what you are. You get hit in
yeah,
the butt with an arrow. That's going to be some unhappy making. That's suffering.
right, right.
Yeah. So that's a
And
that it's the suffering of suffering. And then what's the other kind?
suffering of change.
Suffering of change. Yeah.
Which
What's
is
that
what
all
I brought
about?
up. That's when we are experiencing something that we tend to like. So something pleasurable, enjoyable, something that we're, attached to. Could be something that we have yeah, desire for, and we've got it.
Yep.
And it's like, oh, it feels good for a while. We're really liking it, holding on to it. And then what it could be that we get over it, we're kind of bored with it's maybe it's like too much of a good thing, right? Too much ice cream, too much sex, too much of all the things, and it just kind of starts to get kind of cloying and uncomfortable. Or we have something, we love it, it's great, and that thing and ourselves inevitably change, and so there's a difference in the relationship, and it, yeah, we can't go back to when it the way it was when it was like, oh, the wonderful attachment, the wonderful feeling of attachment.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so it's always going to change. Yeah,
I
the inevitable decay of all things. Oh God.
Right. The inevitable decay of all things. I liked actually, I think it was Doug in Doug's Dharma who also he said this could also be thought of as the suffering of pleasure.
Yeah.
Just like you talked about, that
Yeah.
it is that suffering. We want things that we like to stay around and continue to make us feel the way that we felt,
Right. But
right?
instead it just gets uncomfortable. It's, where it's there's like the spectrum of it, where it becomes addiction. And that is, in no way pleasurable anymore at that point.
No, like I really like cookies.
Oh, me too.
Right. I
Yeah.
love cookies, and it takes me a while to recognize that that I'm no longer enjoying the cookie eating,
Yeah.
like it's one thing. I love it when I can just get one good cookie. Like that's my favorite because then I can sort of just like but
Yeah.
if there's a bunch of cookies, there's a problem, right? Because I will really enjoy that first one, and then I'm sort of like, yeah, oh, one more, right? And I'm
Yeah.
like the cookie monster, but like like a second cookie or maybe a few pieces into the third one, it's not that great anymore.
Yeah, no, it's not. It's not.
No.
Well, I wonder if that's why Americans in particular have such a hard time with the First Noble Truth, and understanding it, is that like we're really good on like big portions and like having just like a ton of shit,
Yeah,
right?
it's never
Like,
gonna run out.
Yeah, it's never gonna run out. We're just gonna keep each one of us having 1 to 2 cars per person. And that's gonna feel real good, right?
Yeah, yeah,
But
right.
yeah, so we don't like the fact that that actually the things that we think we like are making us sick and
Yeah,
unhealthy and uncomfortable and destroying our world.
that's right.
Yeah, we don't like that idea.
No, no, no. So that's it. That right there, the suffering of impermanence or the suffering of pleasure is the second type, and then the third type is the kind that is existential suffering, right? It's the suffering of conditioning. I
I
read
want to
a
hear more about that. Yeah.
I read a really good. I'm not. I wish that I could just read this a chapter out of Trungpa Rinpoche's one of his books where he's talking about the first noble truth.
Yeah.
It's really beautiful the way he talks about it. He's discussing the two aspects of mind. There's like the awareness, pure just awareness aspect of mind, and then there's the thinking and feeling aspect of mind. And he says that in the first place, that awareness, that cognition, is the fact it's actually creating this subject object divide, the dualistic perception that we've been. That's why it's the suffering of conditioning. We've been conditioned, right, to see this me in here and it them out there. And he does a great job. I mean, he spends a lot of time talking about how that causes suffering. But
Mm.
what he said, and I'm going to borrow his language to describe what I think is actually this. It covers all of dukkha, but in particular, what he was focusing on was this third type of conditioned suffering. And he said it's this basically this low level, persistent recognition of the general fucked upness of the world and our
Yeah.
existence. And he
Yeah.
used that word a couple of times, right? Where he was
Mm.
like, it's just this fucked upness,
Yeah.
right? That's what it is. That's what's good. Like, and that you can't, that actually, he says, you know, a lot of people, what the way he describes it, I thought this was so fantastic that basically, like, we're ignorant of that third type, that conditioned suffering in most cases, because what's happened is that we've become imprisoned by it and now it becomes our security. And so
Mm.
he gives the analogy of a like a zoo, a wild animal who's captured and put into a zoo. And in the beginning it's like, man, this is really messed up, right? I'm imprisoned. I've
Yeah.
been, you know, like, this is not okay, right? And that for a while there's this recognition of it not being okay, but then at some point it actually, that captivity and that imprisonment, in when it was initially, it was a source of pain and anguish and discomfort, it actually becomes kind of sweet. We identify with it, right? And
Yeah, like
we
yeah, and
yeah,
if you're getting fed, like you
that's right. It becomes the thing that, you know, that's why it's
yeah, you know it.
conditioning, right?
Yeah.
The animal gets conditioned to being in the zoo. We've become conditioned to be in this sort of dualistic
Right.
state, right?
Right. Yeah.
And so it's the easiest type of suffering to ignore,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? Because we've actually identified with it,
It
and the
gives us identity. Yeah. Yeah.
exactly,
No, totally.
we
I
don't
was
want to
gonna,
let it go. We
right.
actually don't want to let that one go
There's
because
something really, yeah, like on the surface satisfying about it, right? Because like
right.
I was actually thinking about this a lot after I saw the movie Oppenheimer.
Okay.
And I was like really enthralled with that movie. I still am. I think it's an incredible movie. Um, but there was this feeling I was getting where I was just so absorbed in like the horror of what humans can do, right? Where there was like this kind of like this grandiose depression about like the state of the world and about like humanity and the horrible things that we can do to one another. And there was this like identification with that where it was like, oh my gosh, there's just nothing, there's nothing we can do, like we're just fucked, we're fucked.
Yeah.
And I really kind of was able to see that my mind was doing that I was like in some ways um enamored with that, There was like this kind of way that I could just like wallow in this like sorrow of the world. And I think we can do better. Like we can do a lot better than that. We don't have to yeah, we don't want that to be our sanctuary. That like, oh God,
No.
yeah, nuclear war. Oh God, more like war in the Middle East, like, oh, we're just so fucked. We're just, no, 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 no. For for this world alone, like this existence alone, we want to think better than that, right? But also just in terms of our spiritual practice, we can do a lot better than that. A lot better
Oh
than,
yeah. Oh
yeah.
yeah. Yeah, yeah. Absolutely. So 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 we have all these, we have like, we get it, right? There is this this suffering, if you will, this unsatisfactoriness, this dis-ease, if you will. Um so like, is it like, are we just depressed Buddhists then? Like, I mean, come on. And there is some aspect to it that seems to be pointing to, like, yeah, it's not just that life is suffering, like every little bit of it is permeated by it. So if is that the message, and is it hopeless? Should we be in despair?
Well, I can't say that I've moved beyond that yet, to be honest.
Yeah.
I think I'm still like I'm very kind of in like elementary school when it comes to like my Buddhist practice. And I can see through my teachers, right? Like Lama Jinpa is he is more aware of this noble truth than anyone that I know. And yet he's also probably the happiest person that I know. Absolutely the happiest person I know. Um, and so there's something to that, right? Where I think, the Buddha is imploring us to explore what this suffering is. The suffering that is brought on by our attachment to things that inevitably will change, and our aversion for things that, are out of our control. Like we're
Yeah.
going to die. We're going to like we're going to get sick, we're going to be
Yeah.
reborn. Like those are things that are inevitable. And so, if we keep running from that and thinking that we can, drown ourselves in pleasure, that's where the real that's suffering, and but our willingness to see it for what it is can release us in a lot of ways. And so I know that like intellectually, I know that's like that's what we're going for, right? But I'm very much, I think, right now, like in a kind of Buddhist depression, where it's
Oh,
like,
yeah.
yeah, like things just, yeah, this is all suffering, and I'm just so attached to all this crap. Like I'm just
Yeah.
like almost kind of sick of myself feeling, um, which is okay. I think that's okay to
Well,
that.
I think it's better than okay. I don't remember who I was quoting before, but it's that what you just described is this nausea that can be actually taken for good news in a way,
Yeah,
right? So there's this so Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, he actually says that that this the bad news that we're talking about here is in itself good news.
yeah,
And
yeah.
I really like that. Yeah, we have a few minutes. Do you mind? I'm going to read a little thing from
Sure,
him.
yeah, that'd be great.
All right. So he says, in the Mahayana, that's the particular tradition that we're talking about here of Buddhism. Inspiration comes from experiencing the spark of intelligence or enlightenment in us. Discovering that potential is one of the fundamental characteristics of the Mahayana. Having looked into our feelings of inadequacy, pain, and confusion, we see them as neither good nor bad, but as workable. In our day to day life, we find that the search for pleasure, either materialistic or spiritual, is unconvincing. Behind that whole approach is a sense of dissatisfaction and continual struggle. Recognizing that dissatisfaction and struggle is the discovery of the first noble truth, the truth of suffering or dukkha. However, that discovery of the universality of pain is the discovery of Buddha nature as well. That realization is not stupid or ignorant, but intelligence. So the struggle we go through is an expression of enlightened mind. The bad news in itself is good news.
I love that.
I
Yeah.
think that's pretty darn hopeful, and it
It is.
actually the reason why it resonated with me. I know that I've talked in the past about someone who helped me way back before I ever even thought about Buddha or Buddhism or anything. I recognized that he was sort of putting me onto the onto the path. His
Yeah.
name was Carl Silver, and what he taught me, I know I've already told you this, but he taught me to recognize when I was unhappy. And what was so amazing about that is that that right there is, in fact, to borrow a little bit more from Doug's Dharma, is that the first noble truth isn't just like a statement; it's actually a task, right? And the task
Mm-hmm.
is that the noble truth of suffering is to be fully understood. And the beginning of understanding something, to really understand something, is to at least first gain awareness of the fact that it is,
Yeah.
right? That
Yeah.
it's even there in the first place. And what blew my little mind back then was how incredibly unhappy I was all the
All the
time.
time. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And I
Totally.
didn't know that. If you had asked me, I would never in a million years have had said that. Never.
Right.
Right. Except that when I was taught to look to see when I was unhappy, it turned out I was like regularly unhappy throughout the day. Right. There were always these experiences in which there was some kind of discomfort or dis-ease or I wasn't satisfied or whatever.
Yeah.
Right. And so I began to see the pervasiveness of this suffering that we're talking about here.
Yeah.
And that's just the beginning of really beginning to understand, because like what's going to happen when we really get to see all this suffering is then of course we're going to naturally lead towards the second noble truth.
Right. Yes. Yes. Which I'm hoping maybe in a couple weeks we can talk about the second
Yeah.
noble truth if we're feeling up for it. Yeah.
Heck yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I always like to ask you when you come up with a topic. I like to ask if there was something that prompted the topic. So was there something this time that you felt like, okay, I really want to talk about suffering because of this?
I wish it was something profound. It wasn't. It was really just that I don't think that we have discussed, I think, at length the Four Noble Truths, and that I think that there's, it's a pretty juicy topic, right? Like really just getting familiar with what we mean when we're talking about suffering is something that I think gets missed a lot,
Yeah.
right? And it's a common misconception about what's being said, like we were talking about. So that's all. Just kind of a simple, like maybe a little bit of like lazy in a way, where I was just like, like this seemed easy to talk about.
Uh-huh. Totally. Yeah. Well, there's a
We can
wealth.
even do it on one cylinder.
Yeah, I know, right? That's tonight. Yeah, yeah, for sure. Well, I'm definitely having some duka today with that tiredness, so it worked out. But yeah, I mean, I think like it was really good to point out that we can get kind of lost in that idea that, oh, life is just suffering. And I can see how a cowboy yogi version of myself, maybe even just a regular version of myself, can get kind of melancholy and morose about that, whereas
Yeah.
there's almost an attachment to suffering itself, like we talked about. And so,
Yes, yeah,
yeah, yeah, I think that's really important to bring up that, like, okay, I get that that's there, and I don't want to linger there. That's not a that maybe that's some stuff for poetry, right? Which is
yeah,
great. Poetry is
yeah.
great,
Yep.
right? But I also want to uncover and move beyond that that kind of like grandiose depression that we were talking about.
Yeah, well, it's a little, usually if we're, we've narrowed down maybe a little bit too much, right? And maybe identified somewhat with the suffering, because that's, I think, one of the most helpful things about the tradition that we're in is to recognize the universal aspect of this, right? That the suffering that my suffering, although the conditions are unique to me, whatever they happen to be, that actual suffering, that whatever that is, many, many, many others have gone through that and are currently going through that exact same thing. I had this feeling the other day. I slammed my finger or something. Oh man, it hurt. And
Yeah.
something, and I was like, oh. And then, and this, it was a weird thing, but I did a little bit of, I was like, oh, well, that's pain. I see pain. It's still throbbing. Well, I recognize actually many people in this, there's billions of people, plenty of people right now, their fingers are hurting because they slammed
Yeah.
their fingers, right? And then
Yeah.
I was I tried to like kind of practice this feeling of like, right, actually, I'm connected to this large group of people, all of us with like throbbing fingers right now.
Right.
And then it went away. And
Yeah.
it was a neat experience.
Totally. Yeah, that was the same for me when I was experiencing this insomnia last night where I was like, "Oh yeah, Jack, like there's there's like billions of people who are experiencing this and even just people who are parents who don't normally experience
Yeah,
insomnia, like there's so many people who are sleep deprived. Like you're fine. This is like 2 nights out of your life that you've really had a hard time
right.
sleeping. Like you're fine.
Yeah.
You just like listen to some dharma and like fall asleep. You're good. Yeah. Well,
Good.
my friend, I'm excited to announce that we're going to be talking with another good friend of ours next week, Patty Marcotte. I've never said her last name out loud. Do you
I
know how to
think
say
it's
it?
Marcotte, but
Okay.
well, we can
Patty.
ask her.
Yeah, we can ask her. Yeah. Patty is just an awesome human, but also works with children who have like some behavioral health issues, and we just thought she was a great person to talk with about working with challenging people. And so, not necessarily children, but they are included as well. And I'm just, yeah, excited to talk about that topic because, man, we are certainly ourselves difficult people and also surrounded by them. So I think we're gonna have a lot to talk about.
Yeah, well, as a challenging person myself, I can say that Patty has helped me a lot personally. So, yeah, I look forward to speaking with her.
Yeah, absolutely. Me too. Well, in the meantime, take care of yourself.
Yep, you get some rest, Jack.
I'm gonna meditate and then go to bed.
All right, that sounds like a good game plan. Thanks for hanging out with me.
Yeah, thanks too. Talk
Yep,
to you
bye
later.
everybody.
Bye.